I went out of the court, and they were all just pushing. They were all kind of pushing me against the wall. And I was getting closer and closer to the wall. She was 20 years old, backed into a corner, screaming for her life. Not on a tennis court, but on a walkway outside one, surrounded by hundreds of people who loved her so much they nearly crushed her. That is where this story begins. Not with a trophy, not with a ranking, not with a highlight reel winner down the line. It begins with a concrete wall at the National Tennis Centre in Melbourne, and a young woman pressing her shoulder blades against it while a crowd surged forward with no idea what they were doing to her. What happened in Melbourne? Eala had just finished a practice session at the 2026 Australian Open. Routine stuff: warm up, hit, pack your bag, head out. Except nothing about her life is routine anymore, even if the systems built around her have not figured that out yet. She stepped off the court and into what can only be described as a human tide. Fans who had been waiting, not for her match, for her practice, pushed forward all at once. Signatures, photographs, gifts, hands reaching from every direction. The people at the front could see her face. The people behind them could not see anything at all, so they just kept pushing. And Eala, with her father nearby and her coach somewhere in the crowd, had nowhere to go except backward, inch by inch, until she realized this was no longer simply chaotic. It was dangerous. She did the only thing she could. She raised her voice. "Give me some space, or I'm going to get run over." That sentence should not be something a 20-year-old tennis player has to shout at a practice session. And the fact that she did tells you everything you need to know about where Eala currently stands and how completely unprepared the world around her is for what she has become. The infrastructure gap here is what makes this more than a frightening moment at a tournament. At the time, Eala was not even inside the top 30. She was ranked in the 40s. And in professional tennis, your ranking determines almost everything: the courts you practice on, the security detail you receive, the infrastructure the tour builds around you. If you are Iga Swiatek or Aryna Sabalenka, you walk off a practice court, and there are people whose entire job is to manage exactly that transition. If you are ranked 45th, you are largely on your own. You received the standard package. The standard package was not built for someone who generates the crowds that Eala generates. That is the core of this entire story. The infrastructure has not caught up to the reality. The system looks at a number next to her name and makes decisions based on that number. But the fans do not care about the number. They never did. They show up in Melbourne wearing Philippine flags. They show up in Dubai, where, if you did not already know this, the Middle East hosts one of the largest Filipino diaspora populations in the world, a fact most tennis fans had never considered until Eala started competing there and the stadium started shaking. They show up in New York, where Eala herself said the crowd energy hit differently, like the city understood what was at stake. These are not simply tennis fans cheering a good backhand. These are people who flew 12 hours to watch someone who looks like them, who carries their culture onto a court that was never designed to hold that kind of emotional weight. The podcast moment, the Melbourne story, came out publicly weeks after happened, on the Players Box podcast, where Eala sat alongside 4 of the most experienced women on the WTA Tour. Players who have collectively seen everything this sport has to offer. She described walking into that crowd after practice and feeling it close around her. She talked about the wall getting closer. She talked about realizing mid-moment that the situation was no longer manageable. And then she admitted something that reveals a great deal about who she is. Her first instinct was not to demand protection. Her first instinct was to resist feeling like she needed it. She said she did not want to feel like her head was getting too big, as though requesting security was somehow a statement about ego rather than basic safety. That is a 20-year-old trying to stay humble in a situation that would have most veterans reaching for a bodyguard immediately. But here is where the podcast moment becomes genuinely powerful. Desiree Korchik, a player who has been on tour for years and has seen every level of this sport up close, heard Eala describe that wall and responded immediately, without hesitation. You can ask for security. Just ask. Not a lecture. Not a conversation about brand management or image. Just a fellow professional cutting through Eala's hesitation and saying the obvious thing out loud. Eala listened. She requested security for her next practice, got moved to a main court, and Korchik's reaction afterward was 3 words that landed harder than any statistic. "You're crazy big here." This was not a fan account going viral. This was not a commentator reaching for a hot take. This was someone who lives inside the tour ecosystem, who practices alongside these players, who knows the difference between real star power and manufactured hype, and she looked at Eala and said those 3 words without any qualification. That is the moment the conversation stopped being subjective. The hotel room in Dubai, it was not only Korchik. Jessica Pegula, sitting right there on the same podcast, world number 5 at the time, brought up something that had happened in Dubai that still seems almost surreal. Her coach was in the hotel, heard crowd noise coming from somewhere outside, turned to her, and asked what was going on out there. The answer was Eala's match. Not from inside the stadium, from a hotel room. The sound from one of Eala's matches was bleeding through windows and walls into a building across the street, and a top 5 players coach had no idea who was causing it. That does not happen in women's tennis. That is something else entirely. The barrier she crossed herself, what makes Eala so fascinating, beyond the crowds, beyond the noise, beyond the wall in Melbourne, is how she responds to all of it. She does not retreat. That detail keeps surfacing when you trace her story across tournaments. In Miami, she was given proper security, a barrier between her and the crowd. She looked at it. Then she looked at the people on the other side. She saw the flags, understood what it had cost some of them to be standing in that spot, and walked past the barrier. Not because she was being reckless, because she looked at those people and decided that the barrier was not the right answer. In that moment, she went to them. That is not brand management. That is not something engineered in a boardroom. That is a young woman who genuinely understands that the people waving those flags are not simply fans. They are family, in a way that goes beyond any ordinary athlete-audience relationship. They grew up the same way she did. They carry the same identity. They see themselves in her every time she steps onto a court. You cannot manufacture that. It either exists or it does not. With Eala, it exists at a level the WTA has never had to navigate from someone at her ranking position. After the first round loss, one more detail from that Australian Open. Eala lost her first round match. Lost it clearly, walked off the main court having exited a grand slam in the opening round. And then she walked into a crowd that did not move. The fans were still there. The flags were still there. Nobody was heading for the exits because the match was over and she had lost. That almost never happens in tennis. In most sports, honestly, the departure of fans after a loss is automatic and immediate. The love that met her after that defeat was completely disconnected from the result. And she admitted on the podcast that it unsettled her emotionally in a way she had not anticipated, grieving the match on the inside while being embraced on the outside. Those two experiences colliding in real time, genuinely hard to process. But what did she do? She went to Indian Wells and defeated Coco Gauff, one of the biggest names in the sport right now. She went to Miami and kept winning. She did not allow the Grand Slam exit to become the defining story. She let the next court become the story. That is the pattern that defines her. Setback, then response. Loss, then the crowd the next morning. A wall in Melbourne. Proper security in the next city. A viral moment in Miami where she crossed the barrier herself because she decided connection mattered more than protocol. What comes next? The clay season is here. Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, the next chapters. And every single one of those tournaments is about to face the same examination that Melbourne faced. Is the setup ready for what Eala generates? Are the appropriate structures in place? Is there someone at the tournament level thinking proactively about what happens when a 20-year-old with a ranking in the 40s walks off a practice court and into 1,000 people who've been waiting 3 hours just to be in the same space as her? Because Melbourne showed everyone what happens when the answer is no. The sport is going to have to keep up. The infrastructure is going to have to keep up. And if you have been watching this build through the flag waving in foreign stadiums, through the podcast confessions, through the Miami moments, then you already know what the tennis world is only now beginning to understand. Alexandra Eala is not simply playing tennis. She is carrying something considerably larger than herself onto every court she steps onto. And the sport is going to need bigger walls to hold it.